this bad boy, and then we'll go live on the Facebook. Injured clients. I keep thinking I'm going to be the first one to broadcast this live on my personal Facebook. I don't know if anyone's done that yet, but
it has happened. Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you would not be the first.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, that makes me feel a little better. Yeah. Okay. All right. Ready to rock and roll. So let's do this. We'll share my screen. Did you post the link, Taylor? I'll let you have it that time.
I finally got in there before you did.
Dang it. That's okay. Good. All right. So if you guys are watching on Facebook, we would love to have you live on Zoom. Today's topic is what to do with injured clients. And I do have a kind of a typical full presentation prepared, but I always love when people are able to kind of say, hey, this is my unique situation. What should I do? Hey, this is what I'm dealing with. What do you think we should do with this person? We had a lot of great dialogue a couple weeks ago with some similar stuff with regards to coaching challenges. And it's always the most valuable to everybody in the team training group. If you're on the live Zoom calls, that way we can personalize everything to you. It's the difference between being present in like your fitness class versus just watching the replay. So you can still maybe get some fitness, but not as good and personalized as if you were there in class. So my plea to you today is to click the link that Taylor so swiftly put into the chat, the comment section on the Facebook Live feed, and join us on Zoom. And then as I get notifications that people are trying to jump in, I will let you in. And as always, if you have questions, comments, concerns, you don't need to wait for me to take a break in my speaking. You can always just unmute yourself and commence to speaking. But of course, if you are watching and for some reason you can't get on Zoom or whatever, and you have questions, please just post them into the comments. Taylor will see them and then we'll read them back. And so I saw somebody with the name Flex Appeal just joined us. Who is Flex Appeal? That is an amazing Zoom screen name, by the way. Can you hear me? Okay, no worries. Cool. So we'll get going. What we're going to talk about today is what to do with injured clients. So full transparency, I've been coaching for about 20 years now. So been around the block a couple of times, and I can say with certainty that I have seen my fair share of injuries amongst clients and athletes. I have experienced my own fair share of injuries. So I feel like this is a worthwhile topic to talk about, if for no other reason than it could be a reason that clients leave. And when clients leave, that means that we kind of don't have the opportunity to continue helping them to the max of our ability. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this. Chase, hello, how are you? Thank you for joining. No worries, logging in with your Flex Appeal. You just have to do this and flex the entire time on this call. No, I'm just kidding. So let's get rocking. So injuries can and do happen within exercise settings. So of course, I think it's a relevant topic for that. But especially because I think the majority of gyms that we have in our kind of the team training group definitely run some sort of group fitness offering. And we definitely see a higher prevalence of injuries within group fitness environments. So I think it's pertinent because of that. And then I also think, being proactive with communication about what, how, and why you do things is going to save you clients. So if you can kind of get out in front of the injury thing, it doesn't become something to where you feel like you're trying to save them as they're walking out the door. The other way around to think about this is you want to address that kind of elephant in the room head on. All right. So Cliff's notes of the presentation today. I know this is the only thing that Brian showed up for, and then he's going to mysteriously start having internet issues. I get it, Brian. Cliff's notes version. Number one, stay in your lane as a professional health and fitness coach. Piece number two is you want to have a global plan for what it is that you are doing at your gym. And then number three is probably what I would argue is the most challenging concept when you are dealing with injured clients, is addressing the psychosocial aspect. And I don't mean psycho as in psychotic, I mean psychosocial as in psychological social component. All right. So there's a couple of things that we're going to go through here. And then I really want to open up the floor on the back half of this to address any kind of, issues that you have or challenges that you have as a coach when dealing with injured clients, or maybe you are dealing with an injury and we can kind of help you work through that as well. So number one, I think it's super important that we distinguish from the jump acute from chronic injuries. So an acute injury is an immediate event that causes immediate pain, and it may or may not cause degradation of performance, and it may or may not cause degradation of ability. So examples of this are somebody broke a bone, somebody missed a box when they were going for a box jump and did the old shin scrape. All right. You did a bunch of rig work doing pull-ups or something. You tore your hands. That's an acute injury. Barbell dropped on your hand or your head. Dumbbell dropped on your foot. These are all examples of you were fine, and then in the very next moment, you were not so fine. Okay. That is an acute injury. Chronic injuries are definitely the at least from my experience, and I hope this is your experience as a coach too. Otherwise, there's probably a different conversation we need to have. But chronic are overwhelmingly the majority of issues that we are going to deal with as professional fitness coaches. So these are ongoing pains, soreness, discomfort that may or may not cause degradation of performance and or ability. So the back half of that definition is identical to the one for acute, but the difference is acute is immediate, chronic is ongoing, persistent, things like that. Examples is the old achy shoulder, hip, and knee. We've all got that. The guy that is in the gym that lives his high school football glory days, and he's always, oh, the old throwing shoulder is acting up on me today. That would be an example of a chronic injury. Chronic low back pain would be an example of a chronic ongoing injury. Okay. So when you are thinking about different buckets for injuries, just know that there really are two. Acute happened immediately. Chronic, it's just something that has persisted or is kind of intensified over time. Before we go on, is there anybody that has a question? Hey, would you categorize this as acute or chronic, anything like that? Or should we move on?
Quick question on that then. Yeah. So would you say that, let's say they have something like lingering low back pain, and then something comes up where they're feeling it in their back, maybe not necessarily in their low back, maybe it is, but would you consider that in the instance acute, or would that still be considered chronic?
Yeah, I would. That's a great question, man. I would just consider that chronic if it's something that, persists. When I think of acute back injury, this happened to me actually several years ago. It's probably, 2014, 2015. I was in the middle of a really heavy squatting session and went down to the bottom, started to come back up, and literally felt like a whip snapped across my low back. Dumped the weight, fell over, and couldn't walk for several hours afterwards. So that would be acute injury. Chronic is just something that kind of is persistent over time. Yeah. Now, there can be instances where it's like you present with chronic, but maybe the pain really intensifies in the moment. But I would still categorize that even as a chronic injury, not as something that's acute. I think in those cases, more or less, you're just kind of inflaming or pissing off that area even more than normal.
Roger that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So second point that we want to consider is scope of practice. And I shared an article in here. Taylor already shared this in the Facebook group yesterday, kind of getting everybody prepared for today's presentation. This is something that we republish, I don't know, a couple of times a month at this point, because like I said, injuries are just a very common thing that we have to deal with in gyms. And so coaches are always looking for the ways that they can best help their clients. You know, we all have big hearts. We want to help our clients, you know, get out of pain, lose weight, get stronger, feel more competent in their daily life. And so there are constantly questions that we're being asked as professionals by other coaches, like, hey, my client presented with X, what would you do for them? And I will always give some sort of opinion, but it's really, really tough when you're not with the client in the moment, because context really matters. And so my famous answer is, it depends. It is the one that pisses off the most amount of my clients, and I'm very proud to say that. But I also will give them plenty of information to run with. But especially when I am sharing opinions on the internet, I always will follow up with this article here, because I think it's so important for us to honor our scope of practice. So basically the way that it goes is, look, you, and I'm talking to you as professional health and fitness coaches, you're not a physio, you're not a physical therapist, you're not a chiro, an orthopedic surgeon, or any other sort of doctor. With one caveat, unless you are. Right? So you're not a physio unless you are. You're not a doctor unless you are. So I know that is a very broad, general, and inclusive type statement, but hopefully, like, you understand, like, the undertones of it is, if that is not your professional designation, then just make sure that you steer clear of trying to perform the duties of that. And I can remember my own journey as a coach, 20 years ago when I first got into this. I was aware that there was a whole bunch of stuff that I did not know. All right. And it was to the point where I didn't really want to give an opinion on anything, because at that point, I didn't think I was qualified. And when I started to get some coaching hours under my belt, and I started to read, for instance, Kelly Starrett popularized mobility WOD, and that became something that just kind of melded into the lexicon of all of us, especially within the CrossFit space at the time, that if somebody had hip, knee, ankle, shoulder pain, we could help them alleviate that with some sort of stretching or banded distraction things, or voodoo floss, and all this other sort of stuff. I mean, it was in that kind of being a novice to intermediate level coach where I was really hard pressed to do anything that I could to solve the lingering issue that my clients were presenting with. Now, as I got more and more and more experience, the thing that was interesting was that I began to discover, although I knew a lot, I also respected that there was even more that I did not know. Now, interestingly, what that gave me the confidence to do was begin to refer out much more frequently to professionals, to a physio, to a physical therapist, a chiro, any sort of doctor. Basically, the way that I looked at it is, if we're not talking squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, how to perform these movements better, if it's, oh man, I can't get into position here, I woke up, this hurts. If I have to take more than like 12 seconds to answer that, I'm referring them out. And it gives me an immense amount of confidence to know that I do that. It also shows the client that I am confident in my level of competence, and I'm comfortable kind of staying in my, very niche, unique lane. Now, what that also did is it opened up the opportunity for us to partner with a physical therapy and sports med clinic, so much so that we brought them into our space, sublease space. So now I don't say, go to this person that is out of our building. I say, go to Jim. He's 12 feet away, and let me make a personal introduction. All right. So definitely don't be afraid to refer out, because there is a potential for cross referrals. Because the fear that a lot of coaches, myself included, have at a certain point when it comes to referring out to a doctor is that maybe the doctor is going to say, man, this gym is always sending me people that are hurt. They must be hurting them. When in reality, what ends up happening is you can reach out, form a relationship with somebody like this to say, hey, you know what? I've got this person. This is what's going on. This is what they've been doing. But this is beyond my scope of expertise, and I want to refer them to you. Would it be okay for you, if they approve it, to keep me informed of what's going on so that we can re-onboard them back into the gym, which is ultimately where they want to be? So if you take the time to actually invest in the potential for that cross-referral relationship with a complementary, health and fitness professional, it can be a really big win-win-win for everybody, client, other professional, and the coach in the business. If not, that scarcity mindset ultimately is just not going to work out good for anybody. Okay. I'm going to pause, and I saw there was a couple of questions here. Let's see. Okay, good. Taylor asked a question on Facebook. Do you have clients with pain? Do you find it's acute or chronic more often? Amber Butler, thank you for your answer. Chronic for me. She's a corrective exercise specialist at our gym. That's amazing. I would love to know what exactly that means and how you actually roll that out to your clients and what that looks like in practice, because that sounds perfect. So if you could be a dear and jump onto Zoom with us and tell us more, that would be awesome. Subtle plug for joining the Zoom. Tara Harris, mix of both. This is interesting, but I would say chronic is slight majority. Tara, I would love to hear more about this. Like I was saying earlier, I think context matters, because I certainly wouldn't want to jump to any conclusions to say that you guys are hurting, the people that you have coming in, because I've certainly seen it where people just push the envelope a little bit too much, and you can see acute things pop up maybe as much as chronic things. So I'd just be interested to hear that. Jessica, happy Tuesday. It's nice to see you today.
Yeah, I was tuning in on live while I was unable to be in front of the camera, and was happy to jump in. But I'm kind of curious, I'm sure you'll get to it, where age-related limitations cross over between chronic injury. So that's part of why.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind doing me a favor, because I don't want to forget that, if you could pop that into the chat so that it jogs my memory to go back to it, that'd be great. Oh, look at this. I requested Amber to join, and she joined. Yes. Look at that. And she's driving. All right, Amber, if you're driving, that's fine. Don't take your eyes off the road. But if you want to give us a little bit more detail on your corrective exercise specialist, we'd love to hear it. I can't hear you.
I think you're muted, Amber.
Okay, sorry. I'm waiting in the carpool line to pick up my kids at school. So I'm not driving, but
okay, good.
Works.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm a NASM, so National Academy of Sports Medicine, corrective exercise specialist. And I've been training people for about 8 years. And just today, I have an online client that I work with, but it's interesting. She went to her chiro for some hip issue, right? She had fallen from a step, and she went to go get checked out with a chiropractor, and he actually didn't refer her further. She then talked to me, asked me what my opinion was. And even as a corrective exercise specialist, I said, you absolutely should go get an x-ray. And she is right now getting an x-ray. So I'm really happy you're talking about this. I think this is definitely something that you should do for people, even with your expertise and even with specialty, for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've got like I said, we've got a partner physical therapist within our gym. We've got another guy, a chiro, that we've partnered with. He's been a member at our gym for like 9 or 10 years. We've got MDs that come there. And the more and more and more that I talk to these guys, the more comfortable and confident I am to just say, like, look, this is your specialty. Now, when it comes back to getting them into fitness, like, they know they're going to send them back to us, and they do that regularly. But prior, when I was a much more novice coach, I might have just been like, holding them close and making sure that they don't go anywhere for fear of actually losing that client.
Yeah, we actually have a physical therapist as well within our space. So it actually works out well, because for me, I deal with more muscular imbalances and mobility issues. So that's my lane. And anything that acute or anything that, like you said, lingers on, is not solvable and it continues, that's definitely something that the physical therapist should definitely be handling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let's continue on, and we'll just kind of recap or kind of wrap up this scope of practice piece. And I touched on this a little bit earlier, but number one, you got to know what you don't know. And so these are kind of like the known unknowns, right? I know that this could be to Amber's point, a mobility issue, but I don't know enough to know how to make a difference. So I'm going to refer out. So you got to know what you don't know, but you also have to be very aware that there is far more that you don't know that you don't know. And I know that sounds like, wait, these way too many double negatives in a row, but those are what are called the unknown unknowns. And this is kind of an interesting diagram. Brian, for you keeping count, this is picture 1 out of 4 here. All right. So the things we know, those are facts. The things we don't know, these are questions that we can be asking, right? This is where learning happens. The things we don't know that we know, this is like the gut and intuition type feeling stuff. And the things that we don't know, we discover this through exploration, all right? We're not necessarily asking a specific question, but maybe you're reading a book that is completely unrelated to your field, but all of a sudden a light bulb happens, and now we can ask specific questions to get to facts. All right. And a different visual representation of this is like this whole circle is the things that, is your view, the known knowns, the known unknowns. Everything else is a blind spot. And the overwhelming majority of that circle is full of blind spots. I shared conceptually something like this on a podcast several months ago. And one of a personal athlete that I have worked with for about 10 years now, he's a retired Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot. And he said, it was interesting. You were talking about how clients at the up to 500 training hour mark are kind of called novice clients. Up to 1,500 is called intermediate. And then, beyond 3,000, those are like advanced level clients. The connection that I was making is usually when people reach that 1,500 hour mark is when things start to go wrong. That's when people are like, I'm confident, I know it all, I can do this on my own, I can make the decisions. He said that in the the Army aviation world, the most dangerous pilots are between 500 and 1,500 flight hours, because they think they know everything, but they really don't. Now, at about 1,500, you have scared yourself enough to know what's right and what's not. Now, in Army aviation, a pilot is eligible for like senior aviator wings at 1,000 hours in 7 years. 2,000 hours is when you can get master aviator wings. Now, the context that we're looking at this today is for us as coaches. So when I relayed earlier parts of my story, when I was a really, really young coach, I wasn't confident to talk about anything. I was in that novice stage. But as soon as I reached a decent level of competency, I became confident in what I was doing. But that was probably the stage of my career where I don't want to say dangerous, like I was hurting people left and right, but most dangerous, because I thought I knew a lot more than I did. And as I got more experienced, I was aware that I had way more blind spots than I ever realized before. And the further and further and further that I get into my career, the more I realize there's a ton that I don't know. So make sure that you kind of have an awareness of where you're at in your career, but don't ever feel like you are less than because you're referring to maybe a more senior coach or even some sort of outside professional help. All right. So now that we're beyond scope of practice, the next thing that you can really make an impact on with your clients is to have a global plan for movement, right? And what I mean by this is, if you think at Two Brain Coaching, we think about fundamental movement patterns. There's 5. There's squatting, there's hinging, there's pushing, pulling, and then core movements. If you understand basic regressions for each movement pattern and then have a plan day by day, this is something that Sean McQueen talks about ad nauseum, one of the mentors on the Two Brain Coaching staff, just having a plan, figuring out if X is programmed, how am I going to work backwards from that or upwards from that, depending upon who is presenting in class that day? Okay. So that's piece number 1, is just basic regressions, understanding that. Number 2, as best as you can, if you're dealing with somebody that has an injury, I would recommend you try to maintain the local pattern. And what we mean by local is, for instance, on a pulling movement, you can do horizontal pulling or you can do vertical pulling. So if pull-ups are programmed, somebody is unable to do that, can you still do some sort of vertical pulling movement with them? For instance, sit them on the ground, put a band up high and do seated banded pull downs. All right. Now, don't hear me wrong by thinking that, okay, I have to still do the same movement. The goal is always to move pain-free from the get-go. And I remember, back in the day, I used to see people do this at my gym. They would come in, they'd have something going on, tweak shoulder, a bum low back or something. They'd get nice and warm and they'd say, oh, all of a sudden I don't have pain. And they would just go on about their business. That is not a good thing. This is where you refer out to a professional. All right. The goal is to move pain-free from the get-go, not after you actually warm things up, because the warming sensation, it's like putting a Band-Aid over it, right? You're just hiding what is underlying. So let's not do that. So let's say that, we regress them in the same movement pattern, still have pain. We can't maintain local pattern without pain. All right. If all of that is a no-go, remove dynamic movement. All right. Add some sort of tempo. So instead of a kettlebell swing, maybe it's just a deadlift. Instead of a full range deadlift, maybe it's a deadlift off the blocks. Instead of a conventional deadlift, maybe it's a sumo deadlift, so I can keep a little bit more upright torso. All right. So again, this just goes back to understanding regressions. And we're not even looking at just movements. We can moderate tempo. We can look at rest patterns. All of these things are fair game. Now, part of this, and Amber, I'm sure that you got deep into this when you were going through the NASM corrective exercise piece, is understanding that tendons and ligaments develop at a different rate than muscles do. Okay. So when people come in, they get big and strong. Muscle tears, very, very rare. The problem that people present with is tendon and ligament issue. And so this is a funny little, Brian, if you're keeping count, this is visual number 3 today. All right. So this is a great, just something that you can put in your brain to remember. Muscles will get big and fat, or big and strong very, very quickly. Tendons, joints, ligaments take a lot more time to develop, like the structural integrity that you need to keep pace with what is going on muscularly. All right. So if all else fails, we talked about tempo, we talked about changing patterns, regressing. You can eliminate that and just focus on good old fashioned stability work and good blood flow. And good blood flow, what I mean by that is some sort of cyclical or monostructural work, rower, skier, bike, or even just walking. That is something very, very good and healthy that you can do. All right. I'm going to pause and see if you guys have any questions, comments, reactions to what we just talked about, the previous few slides.
I know for myself personally, I've got quite a few athletes who kind of fall into this visual here, where they're strong, they've got good conditionings, but they're conditioning, but their tendons and joints have not kept up. So when I try to steer them towards good pattern work, stability, it's boring for them, right? They want to go hard, go fast because the conditioning is there and so is their strength. So any suggestions on how to really sell it to these athletes?
Yeah. I am not bashful at all about being very direct with people, and I would show them the slide. I've done that. I can send you the image, and then kind of go into explaining it. You know, there's a fine line being a coach in this realm that, like, we're not trying to teach the science of all this, right? But the science is kind of what can really guide our decision making, and teaching a little bit of that to them can actually get them to buy into, like, look, I'm not doing this because I want to take something away from you that you are good at. I'm doing this because you didn't come in here injured, and it's one of my core principles that you shouldn't leave here injured, right? So I would talk to them about this, and then when they say, like, oh, that's boring, or it's not fun, or I don't feel like I'm getting a good workout, I love when people say things like that, because I turn it around and challenge them a little bit and say, okay, you know what? I think I understand what you're saying, but can you describe to me what it means to have a good, fun workout that you feel like is worthwhile? Like, when you get done, what do you want to feel? And let them talk about it. They're going to talk about feeling, you know, crushed and doing all this stuff. Fine. Okay. So continue to ask questions. Well, what if we did something like this and you had a similar feeling? Is that something that you could buy into? Because basically what we're trying to do here is guide them to understanding, like, I can write you great workouts that you are going to buy in, that it is effective to your goal. But we can't just judge every workout right in the moment to say, like, oh, no, this is no good, right? Challenge them to define, like, when you say good workout, what I think is a good workout may not vibe with what you think. And so you want to make sure that there's an alignment there. So show them this, explain to them, like, look, muscles just grow way faster than tendons and ligaments. And that is what is presenting, you know, this is how you're presenting right now. And then how do you actually address it? Like, the science piece is do a lot of tempo work, right? Do a lot of tempo work on, you know, your core movements, your squatting, your pulling, your pressing, things like that. Remove some dynamic movement. Where they can, quote unquote, have some fun is putting them on a bike or a rower and challenging them from an intensity standpoint there that doesn't have a big risk for injury, right? Does that help, Jess?
Makes total sense.
Yeah. Anybody else on this slide or any of the previous ones so far? There is one other that Jessica had that I'll go ahead and address now. It's just age-related limitations compared to chronic injuries. You know, the reality is, like, once I think you guys all know this, but if not, it's worth repeating. Once somebody has, for instance, if you've ever sprained your ankle, this statistical likelihood that you are going to re-sprain that same exact ankle goes up exponentially. And then if you do it again, it goes up exponentially even more. So if you've had some sort of shoulder issue in the past, chances are really, really good that you are going to re-injure that same shoulder. Low back pain, same thing. So all of those things are the same. It's like the reverse of getting struck by lightning twice. The likelihood is exponentially small that you're going to get struck once, and even more so that you're going to get struck twice. So it's an inverse of that curve. All right. So number one, keep that in mind, is that if there is already an injury present, age notwithstanding, it can be a youth athlete or it can be a 65-year-old person. The likelihood that they're going to continue to deal with that just goes up. Okay. Now, the interesting part about age-related limitations, a lot of people think about, brittle bone or something like that. Like, as people age, you know, osteoporosis, arthritis, things like that setting in. Yes, definitely a consideration that you have to have. So the way that I think of programming for people later in life, you can call them legends, you can call them masters, whatever, is less dynamic movement and more just good old fashioned general strength training, because you're able to control tempo in those movements. You're not able to control tempo in a, I don't know, Brian, maybe tempo kettlebell swings, but I doubt it. Certainly not kipping anything are you going to do a tempo with. So there are those considerations. And then just think about, just from a purely daily lifestyle factor, somebody that has been sitting behind a desk for decades, versus somebody who's only been sitting behind a desk for a year, is going to have way more structural limitation. So that is another consideration, right? It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Instead, it's now death by, thousands of hours sitting, rounded posture, head forward, things like that. So yeah, when somebody gets older, these are all the things that have to go into consideration, right? Does that answer that one, Jess?
Yeah, it definitely helps. I have an online client now who's 91. So a lot of our limitations actually have to do with balance and coordination, not necessarily just muscles, tendons, and joints. So it's a little bit of a tricky operation.
Yeah. Do you test balance like in an assessment?
Mostly through like daily activities that we try to repeat and get stronger at. So it's not a formal assessment where, he'd feel like he's trying to do things and fail. But it's definitely a struggle. I've only been working with him for about 6 months.
Yeah.
So we're still early on.
So first of all, kudos to you and that person for reaching out and getting coaching at that age. I mean, that's just phenomenal. Something that I would recommend, and we did this several years ago, is just to your point, I think it's super valuable, the balance component. We put a single leg balance test into our assessment at our gym, and it's very simple. I get a stopwatch and I say, all I want you to do is stand on one foot. And we've got assessment criteria that we look at. All we tell them though is lift your foot up off the ground and balance for as long as you can. And our cap is like 60 seconds. And then we switch and do it with the other foot. And we see like a comparison, is there a discrepancy from one side to the other? Are they hopping around? Are their ankles really moving? What sort of shoes are they? Like all these things we're watching, but whether it's somebody that is on the older end of the spectrum or even younger, they have been blown away by how challenging that actually is to complete. So I think it's super beneficial. And especially for a client like you've got, I think that would be a great assessment. And it would give incredible insight into, it opens up a whole new world of like how I can progress and regress movements just by adding some sort of balance component, right? I've got a client, she's an elite level like CrossFit competitor that I'm working with right now. And grip strength is something that she really struggles with. So I asked her what she does for that. And, talking about farmer's carry, but she's limited in the weight that she uses. So now we actually added, instead of just a traditional farmer's carry, we moved it to one arm. And then now she is marching. So meaning she takes a step forward, brings her knee up to 90 degrees, stabilizes, steps forward, does the same thing on the other side. And it would look like, she is all over the place. Like balance is way low in terms of ability to complete. So the reason that I share that story is I think it just highlights that, like, no matter the level, if you can introduce a balance component, I mean, you can go somebody that's a level 10 in farmer's carry all the way back to like a level 1, right? Just by adding the balance component. So it really opens up, your world in terms of just more tools that you can use to progress people. Okay, let's go to next slide. This is the one that I shared in the Cliffs Notes version to open the presentation today. Is just addressing the psychosocial aspect. And I said, this is probably the toughest part. At least in my experience as a coach, it has been. The reason One of the big reasons that I think this is so challenging, not only as a coach, but as a client, is nobody wants to feel like they are being put into a special box, right? It's like, okay, all of you superhumans, you're doing pull-ups and you're doing 50, and you injured person, you're doing ring rows, and they're set up in the back corner over there. Now, of course, none of you guys would deliver the message that way, but no matter how nice you can deliver the message, it can still feel like you are putting that person into a box or into a corner. And if you're a fan of Patrick Swayze and you know Dirty Dancing, nobody puts baby in a corner, right? So that is the thing that you guys have to keep in mind. That was right, Brian. 4 for 4 right there. That was a great one to finish on. Okay. So nobody wants to feel like they're being put into a special box or being relegated to the corner or being punished or anything. The art of coaching comes down to this. You have to keep the lines of communication open, and you have to continually tie your conversation back to what is best for them and their true goal, right? So in Jessica's case with her clients, you know, where they're presenting with some issues, muscles are certainly outpacing the growth of tendons and ligaments. How do I address that? Look, what is in their best interest is not to have pain when they're trying to wash their hair in the shower because their shoulder hurts so bad. All right. I can certainly relate to that because it takes a lot of time to wash my hair at nighttime. All right. And then you also have to make sure that you are tying it back to their goal, right? The goal was not to get really, really good at big sets of pull-ups. The goal was to lose weight or whatever the goal was. Okay, so keep them focused on the goal. And just to kind of stretch this example out, client is having trouble because we're taking pull-ups away, giving them something else. Again, this is not the language that I would use, but this is just coach speak here. So I'm taking this away. I'm giving them this thing that they do have the ability to perform at a good high level. Just because you can't do pull-ups doesn't mean you're going to fail to lose the weight that you want to lose, right? So making sure the conversation ties back to what's best, not getting hurt, staying moving, and their true goal. You came here for weight loss. Don't worry about the pull-ups. Let's continue to focus on how we can move you closer to your goal. All right. And then the last thing, you know, in terms of addressing the psychosocial component, is you just need to share successes of people that you have helped when they have been injured. What were they able to do before? What happened? What did you do during their kind of recovery process? And then what are they doing now? Because when people don't have a clear path of like, okay, I'm here and I want to get there, but I don't know what that's going to look like, they're going to create all sorts of stuff in their head. You need to replace the narrative and the story by sharing successes of people that you have helped with. Okay. And just to recap, remember, nobody puts baby in a corner. I was going to show the video clip, but I don't know if that would be appropriate. So anyways, the last piece of the puzzle here is, as a coach, your job is to always review what you could have done better. Okay. And so I shared this at the beginning. Injuries are almost exclusive to intense group fitness. Now, don't hear me as saying that injuries only happen there. They don't happen at the Globo gym, because if you're on Instagram, you've likely seen all kinds of, what are they, the fail videos that you see? And I swear the majority of them are in Globo gyms. But in my experience working with hundreds and hundreds of gyms and thousands of coaches over the years, overwhelmingly injuries are in some sort of group exercise model. All right. For instance, at my gym in 10 years, we've been open 10 years this year. So we've had tens of thousands of hours of personal training and group. I polled my coaches. This was last year because I was interested in collecting data. I polled my coaches that do PT and teach the group. I said, hey, how many of you guys in working with your PT clients have had injuries with those clients? And 0 of them have had injuries. All right. Now, I know this is an N = 1, but what I would recommend you guys do is just some informal data gathering at your respective gym and compare. Is it in the group? Is it in PT? Because the data that I've gathered, not just in my gym, but in so many other gyms, is it is in the group. Okay. And that is a reality that you need to be very, very aware of. Some of the tougher questions that you can ask yourself is, number one, with regards to coaching, where could you have been more convicted or convincing in your message? And so, Jess, I think about this for you when you're talking about, like, there's these guys that I've got that are like gung-ho to get big and strong, but now they're dealing with these naggy type injuries. Where could you have been more convicted in what you were telling them, or more convincing in what you're telling them, right? Always trying to improve that. In my communication, I always think about, how could I have explained things better? Or how could I have explained things even more? All right. What you have to remember is, if you make a post on Facebook, write one blog, tell a client something one time, they're probably not, number one, going to see it, hear it, or digest it, right, and make it a part of who they are. You need to have that message, always being out there, because it takes at least 7 times for somebody to see or hear something before they really absorb it. All right. So that's just hitting them more. And then the second part of that is hitting them with a better explanation. So just being better at communicating. The third piece ties into programming. And this is where I find, when I talk to coaches and owners that are in charge of the programming, like, the shields go up and they get very defensive. Like, it's not the programming, it's the client's fault. What I'm saying is, put that on the back burner, like, put your ego aside, try to put your objective hat on, and think about where you could have progressed people more slowly. And here's a great example. If you program a 1 rep max deadlift, and somebody has been there for a few months and they previously deadlifted 200, but they have the strength to deadlift probably 400, are you better served by letting them PR by 2 pounds or by 200 pounds? 200 pounds, you're probably going to get a ton of excitement, great video, share it on social media, all those things, but you're probably not going to have many more PR video attempts with that client. If you give them 202 and then 204 and then 206 and then 225, that is a lot of opportunities for them to understand sustainable progress, versus right to 400, peak maximum physical potential, and then I'm just warding off the decline of strength through the years. Not to say they can't get stronger, but you're not going to have as many opportunities for progression. The other thing I think about for programming is really not just progressing people, but one person. So you may have group programming, but how can you adjust it for that one person that's in front of you day after day after day? And this is one of the reasons that, truthfully, I believe that PT and group have such a discrepancy when it comes to injury instance or injury rates, is quite simple. Like, when somebody shows up for PT, you are programming for that person on that specific day. And all of the worried about what other people are doing, what is RX, Jimmy was moving faster, I was trying to beat this person, I saw this person score. None of that exists in the PT realm. Okay. Again, doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong with group. It's just part of the reality that you need to be aware of. And then the final one is in your messaging. What are you saying that you offer to people? All right. You offering to keep them safe, then think about that should be the first lens that you view everything through. Are you saying that you offer something that is intense, that is really, butt kicking, where they are going to be challenged day in and day out? That's the expectation that they come in with. So if they show up and there's something that is seemingly simple, to Jess, your point, it doesn't seem like it's going to be butt kicking, it's not fun, they don't know if they're going to get a good workout, then what you're delivering versus what you're offering, there's a misalignment. So you just have to make sure that, like, your principles, like what you stand for, what you say you offer, and then what you actually deliver are all in alignment. All right. And so that's kind of the review process. So just as a quick recap, number one, distinguish your injuries from acute to chronic. Number two, scope of practice. If you're not a doc, don't try to be one. That's the easiest way to put that one. And with that, remember known unknowns, unknown unknowns. All right. The blind spots that you have. Third, have a global plan for movement. That includes understanding regressions, difference between development of muscles, tendons, ligaments, and joints. Fourth, this is the toughest part, at least in my opinion, by a long shot, is the psychosocial aspect. Wondering what this person's doing. What did this score look like? How could I have gone faster? I don't want to be scaled back. And then finally, review what you could have done better as a coach. So that's all I had for today. What questions, comments, concerns, or photos potentially, Brian, would you like to see again?
Oh, I'll dial back on the recorded version. Check those out later. But it does make me curious, and maybe this is a topic for another day, but having clients that are kind of overcoming that hurdle of fear of re-injury. You know, they're feeling good, they're moving well, they're not experiencing pain, but they're experiencing that like neurological block to push themselves again.
Yeah. What I've started asking people very directly when stuff like this presents is just simply asking, like, what matters the most to you, and what matters to you right now, and how can we make sure that we move you forward to that? Because when you ask enough questions of people, and I know this is hard for us like fitness enthusiasts to believe, but except for this very small niche group of coaches, most people are just using fitness as a means to an end, right? It's never about the movement. It's never about getting better. For the fitness aspect, it's about what does getting better in fitness really do for my life? And the reason why I have to make that distinction is because if you ask enough questions, or really, really good questions, what they will eventually say is, you know what? I guess it really doesn't matter. What matters to me is that I still feel good when I walk out of here, just like I did when I came in. And then your coaching, your prescription that you can give them in the moment becomes very simple. It's, oh, okay, well, in that case, why don't we just focus on your transitions being a little cleaner? Like, it doesn't matter that you go heavier. It doesn't matter what your score is. What matters, from what you're telling me, if I understand correctly, what matters is you don't get re-injured because of all the limiting things that happened when you did get injured. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Jess, did you have any other questions?
Not at the moment. I'm trying to digest everything, and I'll probably have more later. So
yeah, absolutely. Chase, I know you had to turn your camera off, but I'm sure even with your camera off, you were still in flex mode like we agreed on earlier today. So do you have any questions after today?
No, I don't think so. That was a really helpful topic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Taylor, were there any lingering questions that I didn't get to? Do you have any questions? Well, so I have one for you. You told me that you have chronic knee pain.
Yes.
Yes. What do you do when it comes to exercise to deal with that?
Not a ton right now, because it was a lot better prior to the pandemic. And only actually in the last couple of weeks has it started nagging at me again. But honestly, and I was so cranky to admit this, but losing weight did help a ton with it, honestly. It really did make a huge difference. So the reason why I think it's coming back is because of pandemic weight gain.
Yeah.
So just working on that. I know I've had to do quite a few different kind of strengthening exercises that my physiotherapist gave me, which I did not do very much over the last little while, but will likely be restarting again.
Yeah.
There's not a ton I think I can do about the cartilage wearing down in my knee, but I can at least
Yeah,
kind of
there's
be
not.
very mindful of what's hurting and what's okay, and kind of keep an eye on it. So
Does it hurt you after, because you sit a good bit during the day? Does that contribute? I mean, I know it contributes, but do
yeah.
you notice it like on periods where you've been sitting less versus more?
I try to go for walks a lot during the day, like just walk around my apartment or go for a short walk at lunch and things like that, so that I'm never sitting for a really extended period of time. I only ever really find pain from sitting down if I'm actually stuck in one position for a really long time. So for example, in long car drives or things like that, if I'm sitting in one spot and can't kind of stretch my legs out and things like that, that is very painful. But otherwise it's not too bad. And I think it's good for so many reasons to go for just even a little like wander, like a lap of your house or something every now and again. But it's definitely like one of the big things that keeps my knees from feeling cranky.
Was it, did you have an acute injury, like something happened, or just over time it just kind of crept up on you?
Yeah, it was over time. It actually kind of first became really noticeable for me when I was about 15, I think. And I think at that age, even if your parents tell you to go to physio and like sign you up and bring you to your appointments and everything, you're not serious about it.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, exactly. So it took me until a couple of years ago to start getting it under control. But it definitely helped a lot. It was the one thing I will say that was a little more sort of acute related was I did get a surgery on the knee, and after seeing a separate doctor, because I found that it actually made my pain worse, they were like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that." So it was not the right solution to the problem. Yeah, exactly. So as far from what I've understood, it actually would have been something that made the pain worse. So it made a lot of sense. But I saw a really, really good physiotherapist in the city for maybe like a year, and it helped a ton. So, and then the weight loss.
Yeah. That weight loss piece, man, that's a reality, but it's a conversation that's very difficult to have, like nobody wants to hear that, but I've told people, and not in cruel ways, but like, I know you want to run this marathon, but like, you are not at a good weight that's going to be healthy for you. And I can't, like, I won't sleep good at night, no matter what amount of money you pay me to program or coach you through this race, because it's just, I can't, like.
Yeah. I honestly, when the doctor said that to me quite a few years ago, before I had a better understanding of everything, I guess, I was really angry. I was like, "How dare you? I'm not overweight. Like, what are you saying?" But as time went on, it was very clear to me that, like, as I did lose weight, I think I lost around like 30 pounds, and it made a world of difference. I was so happy and comfortable. I was also walking like 18,000 steps a day or something. I just walk everywhere.
Good for you.
It was really nice. I miss those days. I'm working back toward that, but it made so much difference. So I can't be angry at that doctor anymore, because she was just telling the truth. What made you finally realize? Would a coach have been able to help me realize that sooner? I don't know, because honestly, I think it was a mental block for me, that I was just like, that's people's answer for so many things, and like, I just didn't want to believe that that was the case. So it was just really like being proven wrong by my own weight loss that made a difference. Maybe a coach could have helped, but I don't think I was very receptive to that message at the time, like being completely honest there, which I think is probably quite common with people, because I don't think people like to hear that they're overweight. And I was also, I would say, especially lucky, because I didn't appear to be super overweight. I didn't like have like, I didn't have terrible body image issues. It was kind of like hovering in between, but I think I got away with not having some of the repercussions that some people who are more visibly overweight might have had that would help them get to that point. So I think that helped me kind of stay in denial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taylor, I'll totally agree with you on that whole perspective of that. I've got a couple that I train with, and the husband, he actually has been dealing with some knee pain for months now. He's been seeing our structural massage therapist. He's been doing a bunch of other stuff. And he actually finally has attributed that a lot of that pain relief to his weight loss, and not necessarily to all the other like structural work he's been doing. I mean, sure, it played a role, but he's like, yeah, I lost almost 30 pounds and it's helped a ton. He's like, I rarely have knee pain anymore.
Yeah, it makes a world of difference. It really does. Even if we don't like to admit it, on the receiving end of that advice.
I think we touched on this, I don't know, if several presentations ago, but it's when you try to implant an idea in like a client's head that like, this is what you need to do. No, I don't want to do that. But when it becomes their idea, it's like inception. It's like, now that you have like, that's you're owning that now. Oh, all of a sudden, like it's a viable solution.
Yeah, I definitely think just based on, I try to be very body positive, and I don't think that these two things are mutually exclusive, but I don't think I had the maturity at the time to understand that they can go hand in hand. Like, yes, losing weight can help with your pain, and it doesn't mean that you have to hate yourself while you're overweight. It just means you have to kind of keep working to solve your pain. They totally can happen at the same time. You can still be body positive and
you can be happy and be in pain, or you can be happy and not be in pain. Like either way, it's the answer. The question is like, do you want to be in pain or not? No. Okay. Well, then lose some weight.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys. This was really good. I appreciate all the interaction. If there are any follow-up questions that anybody has, specific scenarios, that you think of later, or even that come up later, please email me. Happy to help. Josh@twobraincoaching.com. My answer is probably going to be, it depends, but we can always jump on a call and dive into it further.
I was just going to ask, is your amount of images going to be equal to or greater than next week?
Now that you asked, I have to go more, but it does depend. Yes, I will find 5 now.
He's just going to put like a different background on each slide, just a little image on each one.
I step up the presentation every now and again. See, more pictures. I had more people today. So that's the key.
The first 4 images are going to be the same as this week. Thanks, my friends. Great to spend another hour with y'all. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.